I would like to introduce you to Julie Matye. Hi, Julie.
Mm. Hi everyone. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, as you said, my name is Julie Matye. I'm from Southern California, originally from Los Angeles. I now live in San Diego for the past like 16 years. I'm 41. I always forget my age. Um, and yeah, I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I was a social worker and working in the trauma field for 12 years. Now I own my own coaching practice, helping couples heal in their relationship using holistic practices. I have a dog. I enjoy going to the beach. I enjoy bike riding. I enjoy traveling. Is there anything else you want me to, you want to know?
No, I think that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, Today we're here to talk about trauma. Have you experienced a trauma in your life?
Yeah. Early in life. Um, I was adopted at a very young age. So I think my adoptive parents brought me into their home at 3 months old. So just growing up with that, I think there was always some underlying trauma that I wasn't even aware of growing up.
Okay. And how did it impact you throughout your life?
Mm, so I wasn't told that I was adopted until I was 8 years old. So that was kind of traumatic too.
It would be a big
So
shock.
yeah, it was pretty shocking when my parents sat me down and explained that they weren't like my actual parents. Like, cause yeah, it's like, then what are you? That doesn't even make any sense, to an
It
eight-year
may
old.
make you feel like, who am I? Where do I belong?
Yeah, yeah, yes, definitely. Um, so that was traumatizing in the way that was even brought to me. Um, I was just sad, thinking that they weren't. And back in the you have to remember this was back in the 80s when people didn't understand trauma, when adoptions were very taboo. A lot of people didn't know how to talk about it or bring it up. A lot of adoptions were closed. So you didn't even have any information on your story of origin or your biological family. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of questions. The Who am I? Where did I come from? Do I have siblings? Like, does my adoptive family still like think about me? Like, how does that, all of those things affect you um, in the initial moment, and then you also carry those things throughout your life. So after that, I think I remember just feeling different, like different from the other kids in my class. I was the only one who was adopted. I went to a very small Catholic school, um, which was a great school. I'm so happy with the community I grew up with and the family I grew up with. They're I just made lifelong friends. I still talk to all my childhood friends, and so and their families became like my family. So that was a nice way to grow up. But underneath it, I always felt like there was something missing. Like it was hard for me to really open up. Um, there was always like a fear of rejection underlying my relationships. Um, Even though I was close to people, it was hard for me to be really vulnerable with my emotions. Always fearing abandonment, that people wouldn't accept me. So on the
And
outside, everything seemed normal. I was in a good family. Like, I went to a private school, I was in sports, my parents were very involved, but underneath, like those beliefs that I formed about myself, like, why wouldn't somebody want me? Or what does this mean? You're not my real parents. Like, that left a big, I think, hole inside of me for a long time.
It sounds like it really impacted you. And how did it impact your nervous system?
I just think subconsciously, I was always afraid to show myself to people.
Be seen.
Um, yeah, like the real me. Like, I had a lot of friends, I still do, but all across my friendships, I think that they would all say at one point or another, like, you know, they'll remember times where I did open up and where that was like a rarity, where like it was my true feelings, my vulnerability, my like, and that took a lot of building, within our friendship for me to
So
trust.
there was a lot of guard,
Yeah,
a lot of
a lot
walls.
guarded. Yeah. Um, so I think subconsciously just, yeah, I was just in fear, like questioning myself, questioning how I acted. Is Are they gonna like me if I show this side of me? I think I always had like a tough exterior where I was focused on others, and their issues and always trying to help them. That way people wouldn't focus on me because that felt uncomfortable. Um,
I believe that's very common for people who have childhood trauma, that it can be a struggle sometimes to open up and trust and let walls come down.
oh yeah, definitely. It affects your inner compass for sure. Your intuition, your self-worth, your self-trust, your confidence. Um, yeah, it affects you significantly when you have childhood trauma and it's not processed.
And how did in-body processing make a difference?
I found embodied processing, I think it was like a year and a half ago, maybe. I had been a social worker. Um, so I worked with children in the foster care system, and also wards of the state. So children that were on probation, I started out in group homes. And then I moved over to working for the Health and Human Services Agency, the Department of Child and Family Wellbeing. So I was doing that for a decade. And so dealing with childhood trauma, severe abuse and neglect situations, and helping families reunify and manage the symptoms of their trauma and build healthier relationships with one another. And I had cases that were bringing up a lot of my feelings about my situation and my childhood trauma without even realizing it. And by the end of it, it was just like I just felt disconnected from the job. I knew that there was more, that what was going on underneath, like the surface, for people's issues after working with them for so long. And I found it when I left. Um, and it just opened up like a whole new world for me, because prior to that, you know, you're guiding people to change their behaviors and to build healthier relationships. And for me and my journey too, right, to do that with my husband and my daughter. Um, and I didn't know anything about the nervous system and how that was like affecting my interactions, my moods, my ability to emotionally regulate, the way I connected with my daughter after she was born, and my husband and my marriage. So when I found EP, it just, it was like the missing piece. I was like, this is what has been missing. It's using my body, getting to get comfortable with my triggers, learning
I've
how
heard
to,
that. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, learning how to emotionally regulate, because that's what trauma is, right? It's that fear. It's being hyper vigilant, like it's modifying your behaviors around people so you could be accepted and not rejected or not abandoned, like adapting different coping skills to deal with how you're feeling on the inside. And to be able to tap into that energy that was driving all of those fears, and core beliefs that I had about myself was, that's like the gift of life. Like that, you can't explain that.
So embodied processing has had a huge impact on you.
Yeah, learning how our bodies work and how we could be healing ourselves using our bodies, like that is, it's just such a, it just changes everything. You're no longer in your thoughts. You're understanding where they're originating from. And you can learn how to, manage them and not spiral or not let your traumas take over a situation. You can be more
And do you
grounded.
believe embodied processing would help teenagers?
Oh, absolutely. hmm I worked with teens for a long time. Like I said, in group homes, and then I also worked at an emergency shelter, and had a bunch of kids on my caseload, obviously, as a social worker. And a
Have
lot of
you,
them, yeah, it's like we focus on the outside, right? It's like, oh my God, their behaviors, they're talking back, they're being disrespectful, they're not cooperating in their home, they're not doing their schoolwork, they're sleeping too much. All of that is a sign of trauma and a dysregulated nervous system. And a lot of the times when we're looking and pinpointing these outside behaviors, it can shame people. And the last thing somebody with trauma needs is to be singled out and feel shame for what they're doing, because a lot of the time it's out of their control. And to learn that it's within your control and to learn about your body, I think would make a huge difference in a lot of people's lives, including teenagers.
at what age do you think embodied processing would help people? 10, maybe 12?
On their own,
Hmm.
probably, yeah, closer to like a teenager age. But I think that, parents and caregivers can also help children learn about their feelings and their emotions and how things feel in their bodies and how to, um, you know, co-regulate with somebody in a safer way rather than like lashing out. And I remember when I was a social worker, I used to have to deal with a lot of behaviors from trauma. And there were times where I would watch kids dissociate. They would be triggered by something and they would dissociate. You could see their eyes they were not present anymore. Like something had pulled them back. And sitting with them afterwards, after they were able to release all that energy that was built up, sitting with them, you know, just having them place their hand on their heart, reconnect, and just like down-regulate with them was extremely helpful to
So the
them.
basics of EP you could do with very young children, teaching them about emotions, teaching them how to start to regulate their emotions, breath work.
Yeah, I mean, the age that comes to mind is like 8,
Okay.
but like to do that, like to be able to, it's
Go into
inside.
a resource.
Yeah, like when you're feeling upset, what do we do? That type of talk. I
Mhm.
think it could be helpful from a very young age. Yeah.
And especially with you working with so many children that were going through the foster system, that could have a profound impact on their lives.
Yeah. Just I think it could. It could. You're never going to get rid of those core wounds. Those, they stay with you, like, but they don't have to control you, you know, and you don't have to keep playing them out, like as you go on. Like, you can be hurt about something and still have a healthy life. And I think if people understood what trauma actually did to them, to their bodies, they're dysregulating their nervous system, and then how that affects their mental state and their mentality about themselves and their core beliefs about themselves. Yeah, I think it could do wonders for sure.
And are you glad you started your healing journey?
Yeah. I think we start our healing journey. Well, I started my healing journey. Um, I think before I even realized I was on one, which I think is the case for a lot of people. Um, just being in the relationship I chose with my husband. I remember the first years of our relationship, it would give me anxiety. Uh, I just felt like I said, like I never felt good enough to be in a relationship. I always had to like modify my behavior to feel accepted. Um, and then as time went on, also like my relationship triggered a lot of emotion. And so I grew up in a household where yelling was very normal, like to get your point across. So that was coming out, like never being heard in my household, or like having my feelings not validated, was coming out in my relationship. So that just him having patience and me like evolving and reflecting on my behavior um, was a journey. And then, yeah, I really started diving in deep after I had my daughter and I left my job and I got into EP. And then you realize you're only scratching the surface if you're not um, going deep and digging deep.
Once you start, you just go down, you just keep on going and going. You're like, oh man, there's more and more healing to do. But
I
it is
know.
an amazing journey.
Yeah, it's an amazing journey to just get to know yourself in an authentic way, not out of the beliefs you formed about, your past traumas and how they made you feel and what they made you believe about yourself. Um, to understand yourself with all of that like gone is something I think that everybody should experience. Um, it's definitely worth it. I know people are scared, but
Now, growing up, did you realize you had trauma?
no. Isn't that wild? No, I was
So at
adopted.
what point
I had no
did you
idea I had
realize?
trauma. A lot
So
of
at
people
what point
don't
did you
realize.
realize that you had trauma?
Probably, oh God, probably not till maybe like 3 years ago. Isn't that wild? That
It
is so
happens to
wild.
many, many people, not a realizing that they have trauma. I've experienced trauma and I didn't realize I had carried trauma. I think it
Trauma
happens
is a
to
part
many
of
people.
life. Yeah. Trauma
And
is
what it,
anything that takes you away from yourself and your core. It's all the negative feelings we hold. And I don't think people realize that.
because people look at trauma as if you were assaulted or were in a terrific car accident. I mean, the list couldn't go on, but they don't always connect it to home, to themselves or their family.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, like in the 80s, when I was adopted, it's like the it was very taboo, right, to talk about. It was like a hush hush type of situation. Um, and I know for me and a lot of people I know that were adopted, we were told that we should be grateful that we were adopted without really acknowledging the loss and pain and hurt. It's like people believe that they're taking a child and bringing them into a situation that's better for them. And a lot of time that's the case. That's the point of adoption, right? If your bio
Right.
parent can't take care of you, you want to be in a better situation so you could thrive. But without acknowledging that pain and loss and confusion, that's, yeah, how are you supposed to process it? And you're just told to be grateful. And you are grateful.
But that's a
I'm
trauma
very
on its own.
grateful. Yeah, right. It's like then you're just supposed to go around acting grateful and never really acknowledging the pain you have inside. And then I also grew up with a emotionally dysregulated mom, like I said, who used to yell a lot to get her point across. So a lot of the time I couldn't speak up for myself, or I was worried about like her feelings more than mine, which was common for the culture I grew up in.
It's very
Um,
common.
yeah, yeah, I think it's more than culture. I think it's like widespread, but um, yeah, it was just common. So never having to deal with my feelings and then having to suddenly deal with them when I was in a very serious relationship with my now husband, that was an awakening, like that I had so much emotion built up inside of me that hadn't come out yet. Um, but yeah, I didn't even realize I had trauma. I thought it was just life. Like I didn't understand what trauma was
And
until
what advice do you have for our viewers?
just it, just to remain hopeful, to replenish your faith in yourself, find your inner strength, be courageous, and do what's right for you. A lot of the times, I think when people have trauma and it's affecting their relationships, or their lifestyle, or maybe they're doing things that they don't really value because of their coping mechanisms, that carries a heavy weight. But I think once you realize that there's a path forward and it starts with you, I think that's just very empowering.
It is definitely very empowering.
Yeah, because a lot of the times when you have trauma, you're looking to external factors to blame or soothe yourself. And I don't think people understand that you could learn that for yourself.
So it's turning it back onto the person and saying, what are your needs?
How do you
And
feel them? Yeah. Get in touch with your emotions. Like, emotions aren't scary. They're the key to living a very healthy, fruitful, thriving life. And when you have trauma, you tend to suppress your emotions because they're
because you
scary.
don't want to feel
Yeah, it's
sad. We've
scary.
been taught maybe not to feel anger.
Yeah.
It's
And
not
when they
always
come
easy.
out, they come out. They come out. Like, if you've been suppressing all of those emotions for so long, of course it's going to be overwhelming. The last thing I wanted to do when I left my job as a social worker was to sit with myself. But my body was like, this is the best thing for you. And your body will always tell you when something is what it needs. And I meditated. I started doing the somatic work with embodied processing, getting to know my nervous system and how that played into my connections with in my relationships and with myself. And it was uncomfortable. I cried a lot. All the tears that I needed to probably cry for the last 40 years of my life were coming out. I was very angry. And yeah, all of those suppressed emotions come out. But if they don't, if when you learn how to process them and just let them flow through you, that is extremely liberating. It's like you don't have to hide anymore. You
And
don't have to.
when we don't allow them and we push our emotions down, what happens?
They come out in ways that you don't intend.
And you
They come
don't see it coming.
Yeah, they come out in the way you treat yourself, in the way you treat your children, in the way you treat your partners, in the way you treat your family members, in the way you show up at work. They come out in your motivation. They come out in your energy levels. They create mood swings, irritability, frustration. They create addiction.
They create shame. The list
They
goes
create
on.
shame. Yeah, it's not good to hold in your emotions. You have to learn to let them flow through you. That is the key to life and thriving.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today. And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.